terms of pure rhetoric, was Churchill. And Churchill, of course, others abide our question, thou art free, as Matthew Arnold said of Shakespeare. He is the one that everybody naturally would point to in terms of English rhetoric, in the way that we would point to Martin Luther King and now Obama in terms of American. And their differences are quite revealing, aren't they? There is a tradition in America which is partly to do with the first wave of immigrants, I think. It's a homiletic tradition, a tradition of sermonizing, a tradition of the pulpit. And it's a low church tradition, and it's one which uses all the techniques of the great preacher to awaken, the rhythms. I have a dream, and so on. And in Churchill, it's a rather more classical, although he famously failed in his, Harrovian entrance exam, but was passed through because his father was Lord Randolph. And although he never went to university, think of, he wants to say, go Britain, all right? You want to say, go England during the war. You want to say, yay, you'd say, en avant. How would you say it in any language? He dared to say, in the 1940s, at a time when it was already unbelievably old-fashioned, advance, Britannia. How does that still send the chills up your thing?
Yes, it does. But one of the extraordinary things about Churchill is that the speeches that we now know by heart were all made in the House of Commons. They were political arguments in the most exacting chamber. Yes. So far, what we have from Obama, and I thought his speech in January was extraordinary because the selling. Yes. The campaigning was heroic and spectacular. It was inspiring, and you did. It was go Obama. You're quite right. But the inauguration speech almost deliberately refused rhetoric.
It was very noticeable there.
And he took the third clause down. He ended on a negative, and it was as if he was saying, "Now this is different. This is business.
No cheap fireworks here."
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. And he's since had to do more studied speeches like the one at Notre Dame, or where he speaks to students, and there he does, again, sort of, like the touch paper.
And I assume that the test will be, when he is putting forward great policy, how he addresses the nation, and also in that intimate way that we've come to expect of American presidents, the breakfast briefing when he talks from the White House desk, where he can't bring out the fireworks, he has to do it as close as this.
Yeah, and sometimes, of course, the last thing you want to do is, as it were, it's like parents who say, "Oh no, don't get the children excited. They need to go down for bedtime." So if you're going to read them a very dull story, very quietly. I know this as an uncle. If you start playing games with them and pulling faces and doing these things, you're getting them all hot and excited. They won't sleep for 2 hours. And I'm not saying, well, maybe I am saying that politicians treat their public as children, but you want to get them excited for an election, but then there are long periods in which you don't want them excited. You don't want to enervate the spirit of the people.
Reduce expectations.
Exactly, reduce expectations, keep it calm. And all the great speeches we know are always a result of a crisis of some kind. There's the Roosevelt speech about this day will live in infamy was, the day after Pearl Harbor. And obviously Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream was bringing to a climactic pitch the whole issue of civil rights in America. And Churchill, of course, was against. We don't remember many of his speeches outside his premiership, his first premiership during the war. Though, in fact, the very first speech he made, his maiden speech, was astonishing because it was controversial, which is against the spirit of the House.
You mentioned a minute ago the idea that we all secretly love America or want to love America.
Yes, yeah.
And I'm assuming that even in terms of language, the America that we love, as you say, is like Capra, it's Billy Wilder, it's the most successful imperialist tool ever designed, which is Hollywood and rock and roll combined. Yes. So I'm fascinated by the point at which you, the absolutely quintessential English-educated man, fell in love with the idea of American popular culture.
I wonder about that too. I wonder about all... I think it really is. I don't know if any of you have ever inspected why it is you like what you like. Part of me is is a vulgarian, and I will absolutely admit that much of American culture is the vulgarization of the sophisticated European culture. You talk about Billy Wilder. Well, Billy Wilder comes out of a tradition, the tradition that invented cinema, the tradition of Murnau and Pabst and Lang and Offels and Austrian and German expressionism, and the very beginning of cinema, which was an amazingly artistic. It was connected to the plastic arts of the time, the sculpture and the painting and the literature of Germany, and the great actors of the day were German until, unfortunately, some idiot invented sound, and then suddenly Conrad Veidt could no longer be a romantic hero to the English-speaking people, and ditto Peter Lorre and all the others. And they came over and they realized the American public wanted a good story, well told. They wanted something romantic. They wanted something comically clever, but that satisfied you at the end, that sort of provided. And a part of me loves that. But the point is, it's not either or. You don't either like Billy Wilder and Walt Disney or Wagner and Goethe. You can like both. The two are not mutually incompatible, and by any means, one doesn't rule out the other. But I noticed the play on music, it was a lot of swinging, a lot of Frank Sinatra. It's just fantastic that America can, rather than, although there are great American classical composers, that rather than try and take on, Brahms and Mahler and Richard Strauss and Berg and the composers at the same time, Irving Berlin was rising up and writing popular songs that I would argue were as important as Wojciech or as important as Till Eulenspiegel or whatever else was being written in the classical sphere.
One of the cleverest things about lyrics, which you just introduced, is the great thing that is preposterously cited against America, that they have no sense of irony. The beauty of those great lyricists is that they were using words and music in a way that invited you to challenge the authenticity of every phrase.
Yes, exactly. I mean, if you take Lorenz, Hart and Cole Porter, say, probably the two finest lyricists of the 20th century, that their irony is apparent in every phrase. It is, only it's a really subtle irony. Mostly, when British people say Americans don't get irony, they're saying Americans don't get sarcasm. Well, yes, Americans get sarcasm, I think. They understand. If it's raining and an Englishman says, nice day, they know that the Englishman is trying to be funny. And failing! And failing dramatically. What is more pathetic? How does C.S. Lewis put it in the Narnia book? Saying the thing which is not. It's feeble. If that's one's idea of irony, is just crass sarcasm. And Americans also think, okay, and do you have to do it all the time? Can you, stop?
Do you know that A.C. Grayling, Richard Holmes tells the most wonderful story based in Hay-On-Wye about the "It's Raining" gag. Oh, no. And he's stopped by a man as he's going into a tent to speak, and this man says, Mr. Holmes, it's raining today. Marvellous weather for biographers. And Richard looks at him and says, what? He says, plenty of feet of clay.
Oh, that's very good. You see that genuine wit. I like that.
The idea that